Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Introduce myself. My name is Melvin Berliana Mirula from my NPM is 224111025 from Management 22A class. Today I want a presentation about working capital management. Definition of management working capital. Working capital management is a strategy in, ma- in, maint- in maintaining uh, a balanced level of current assets and current liabilities. The goal is to manage the company's cash flow, inventory, and account payable and receivable and receivable. Working capital management consists of two elements, namely current assets and liabilities. The, quanti- the, quantity, the quantitative concept of working capital management is the quantity or amount of costs contained the current asset element. Current assets also have funds that revolve back in a shorter time or in their original form. So working capital in the quantitative concept is the entire amount of the company's current assets. And then management objective working capital destination. Destination management capital work it's the business can manage current asset and current liabilities so as to get a good net working capital and can guarantee the liquidity level of the business. These current assets can include cash, securities, receive, receivables, inventory, and funding needed to support current assets. Other objectives of working capital management include meet the profit or loss of the business, optimize spending within a salary tier, obtain fund from investor because it has positive financial ratio, can appreciate working capital so that payment of needs is always met is always is always is always met on time, protection from working capital crisis. And then capital concept work. The first is quantitative concept. This concept emphasizes emphasize this concept assumes that working capital in the amount of current assets or gross working capital required to meet the needs of the company in financial routine operational needs or showing the amount of funds available for short-term operating purposes. Quality concept. This concept apa lagi tadi? Emphasize em, em, emphasize on quality work capital in concept in the axis axis of current asset over short-term debt net working capital, which is the amount of current assets derived from the long-term loan and from company owner. This definition is qualitative because it solves the available availability of current assets that are greater than the current debt, short-term debt. And then function concept. This concept emphasizes ah, emphasize emph- emphasize the function of the fund on in order to generate income or profit from the company's main business. Basically, the fund owned by the company will entirely by use to generate profit. This period, current income. There are some funds that will be used to obtain or generate future profits. For example, buildings, machinery, factories, office equipment, and dan lain-lain. Type type of capital work. Gross working capital. Gross working capital is working capital that includes the entire amount of current asset. The amount of company's current asset can be known through the balance sheet or Our statement of financial position. Gross working capital includes all types of current assets, namely cash, commercial paper, advance financing, account receivable, and an inventory account. An inventory. Account receivable and inventory are the main account in net working capital. Net working capital. Net working capital is obtained by subtracting all current assets from all current liabilities. Current liabilities include obligation to pay current debts. This type of current debt relates to taxes, salaries, bank notes, trade, and short-term bank debt. Only short-term debt with the longest period of 1 year is counted. Level of net working capital. Working capital is always needed by a company. In carrying out daily operational activities. Working capital that is always needed by a company in every operational activity is referred to as permanent working capital. Permanent working capital is further divided into primary working capital, normal working capital, and variable working capital. Primary working capital is working capital that must be available because without business continuity in a company and can end. Normal working capital is used for the company's production activities under norm. Working capital from current circumstances. Meanwhile, variable working capital relates to change in the amount of capital under certain conditions. Variable working capital is further divided into three types, namely seasonal working capital, cyclical working capital, and emergency working capital. Seasonal working capital is working capital that can be changed in the value following seasonal change in the business. Cyclical working capital is working capital whose value changes following the business cycle. The business cycle that occurs. Meanwhile, emergency working capital is working capital whose value changes only our emergency condition that before the company. Determination of amount working capital. The amount of working capital recorded in a business must be properly calculated or professional, such as by the chief financial officer (CFO) or by the financial manager, so that there is shortage or excess capital. Capital can change because of change in sales. For example, if there is an increase in sales, the working capital will also increase. However, the amount of capital will depend on each current asset. Usually, the amount of working capital needed in a business depends on two things: the amount of principal operation or sales, and the working capital turnover. For the number of principal operation or sales, the greater the sales or principal operation, the greater the need for business capital, and vice versa. As for working capital turnover, the faster the working capital turnover, the capital required will also be relatively larger. Conversely, if the capital turnover slows down, the capital required will be less. And the conclusion is: so working capital management is a method used to maintain the balance of current assets and current liabilities, such as to manage the company's cash flow, inventory, and payables receivables. To be able to determine the numbers of easy working needs, it can be done by a business post perform working capital management in order to maximize expenses within a sales level, obtain funds from investor, follow working capital so that payment of necessities can be made in a timely manner, and also have protection from working capital crisis. For the financial statement in it, it's good to be recorded and presented accurately to match the required standardization. However, this will be difficult to achieve if you are still using manual method. Therefore, use accounting and business software from accurate online. Sekian itu saja dari saya mohon maaf jika ada pronunciation yang salah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.